Welcome to Patscast. I'm Brad Whitaker. Today is the day Bill Belichick is set to meet with Robert Kraft for his annual end of the season meeting, and many are expecting this to be his very last with the New England Patriots. According to some media reports, we saw Jay Glazer with Fox Sports say it yesterday. We saw Tom Curran say it many weeks ago. Patriots are expected to move on from Bill Belichick and bring in a new head coach heading into next season. But there are conflicting reports. We saw Mike Reese say the team hasn't made a decision yet. As soon as yesterday he said that. So it's possible a decision hasn't been made. It's possible that conversation between Bill and Kraft will determine that. Or maybe there's going to be a series of meetings going forward to see what the future may hold for Bill Belichick and the head coaching position with the Patriots, and perhaps the GM position as well. Now, Belichick did have a press conference very early this morning where for the most part it was business as usual, but there were a few nuggets in there that I think are worth mentioning. But first, his full intention seemed to be continuing to coach the Patriots. It was business as usual. He was talking about kind of positioning the team to transition into the offseason and do well. He's ready to engage in a rebuild. And when he was asked if he would give up player personnel duties, he said he was open to doing whatever the organization collectively says is best for the football team, however you want to take that. He did say he was still under contract with the team, which is news, certainly. We knew, based on reports, that Belichick had a contract that probably ran until the end of next season. Bill didn't go into great detail. He never does. But he did say he's still under contract with the team. So certainly there for at least another year, at least according to his contract. And of course, he confirmed that he'll be meeting with Robert Kraft today. But when pressed on it, he didn't say when. He said, we have a meeting with the players. I have a meeting with the staff. I'll be meeting with Robert today. He did also say, when pressed a little more on his meeting with Kraft, that it could be a series of meetings. We don't know. So left that kind of open-ended, and he certainly would not get into hypotheticals about his future, whether he would want to coach for another team, whether he would want to give up certain control of areas of the team that he currently has. Would not get into hypotheticals. Not a surprise there. It was Bill being Bill for the most part. But the biggest nugget from the press conference, when asked by, I think it was Phil Perry, if he had met with Robert Kraft at all during the season, Bill said yes. So apparently Bill has met with Kraft already. Now, take from that what you will. That could have been week one. We don't know. But he says he has met with Kraft throughout the season. Didn't say how many times, didn't say when, but he did say he had met with him. And Perry did ask a follow-up, and of course Bill, asked the comms team, we're not doing follow-ups, right? I don't understand. And of course Bill didn't provide any details there. But good job there by Phil Perry for at least getting Bill to admit kind of those two big nuggets that he had met with Kraft, and then another reporter got him to admit that he is still also under contract with the team. And Bill certainly said major changes would need to be made, and certainly wasn't satisfied with the team's 4-13 record. I don't know how you feel. Certainly 6 weeks ago, I was very ready to move on from Bill Belichick. I think pretty much everyone's ready to move on from him, at least as GM, seeing how the team has drafted these last 4 years since Tom Brady left. But I'm feeling a little bit hesitant about him no longer being the coach of the Patriots. Maybe it's just kind of feeling melancholy at the end of the season. You had the things going on with Matthew Slater yesterday and him hugging David Andrews, and it kind of felt like a real sad closure to the season, and it did not end the way Bill Belichick certainly wanted to, with a loss to the hated New York Jets in the snow, in really just a horrible offensive performance from the team where they couldn't throw the ball. And ultimately they had 2 turnovers in the fourth quarter when they had the chance to potentially win the game. Not the way you'd want to go out, even though ultimately it may help the Patriots in terms of draft position. But I really want to break down how Bill can potentially convince Robert Kraft he should stay with the team. And perhaps he has a plan going into this meeting with Kraft. Maybe he has just kind of an initial meeting and then will unveil a plan later on. We don't know those details, but we all know the biggest issue has not necessarily been the coaching. Certainly there's been some issues there, but it's been drafting and acquiring players and not prioritizing the offensive side of the ball, with perhaps the worst Patriots offense, at least in my lifetime, we've ever seen. And I was watching this team a little bit before the Brady days when they did not have a very good offense. During the early Bledsoe years, I know they made the Super Bowl one year and they had some good teams there, but this was by far, in my lifetime, the worst offense I've seen in New England. So Belichick could say, hey, Robert, I'm willing to cede most control of player personnel, whether it is to Matt Groh. Hopefully not. I don't think anyone's satisfied with Matt Groh, but I'm willing to cede control to whomever you want to bring in, whether it's an Adam Peters or another GM, a young guy who can kind of modernize the administrative staff of the Patriots. I'm willing to cede control of that and just coach the team. Belichick has always made the final call, so perhaps he'll be willing to have a GM there who reports to Kraft and not to him, and then you kind of have two separate lanes there. Not sure how that's going to work because Bill has his tentacles in everything with that organization, so that's, if Kraft agrees to that and is willing to keep Bill, there's going to be a lot of hard conversations going forward about how that operation ultimately functions. Patriots have never also embraced football analytics under Bill Belichick. You know, we saw the movie Moneyball with Brad Pitt. That was about the Oakland A's season in the early 2000s. Well, that type of analytics has been going on for 2 decades now in baseball, but also in the NBA and certainly in the NFL. I think that if you see the plot of Moneyball, I think Brad Pitt's character, he's playing Billy Bean, is pulling somebody from the Indians who ultimately went to the Cleveland Browns, I believe, later on. So there is really this modern analytics operation that most NFL teams have, where the Patriots do not have. Bill kind of has his old school method, so perhaps he would be willing to modernize there as well. You know, there are whole NFL teams with dozens of staff dedicated to this. Maybe Bill says, we need an analytics shop here in New England. I will be hands off, let them do what they want to do. They will make the player personnel decisions, and I will just coach. How do you feel about that, Robert? Bill could also allow for more control from Bill O'Brien or another offensive coordinator. Maybe they want to bring back Josh McDaniels or pair them. McDaniels comes back as a quarterback coach or something and says, hey, I'm going to allow them to make the decisions on the offensive side of the football, not just in terms of calling plays, but in terms of hiring staff. We saw a report come out last week that said Belichick would not let Bill O'Brien hire any staff except for, I think, one guy, and he still had to make the decisions there on offense, and Bill was still very hands-on with the offense. Maybe he could say, hey, I'm going to delegate that entirely to O'Brien or another offensive coordinator or somebody else, or we bring Josh back or do something there. And that way I don't have as much control of the offensive side of the football because clearly it is not working. He could also plan to elevate Gerard Mayo as the official defensive coordinator. They gave him an extension last year, gave him supposedly a greater role alongside Steve Belichick, but he still doesn't have that official title of defensive coordinator. But if you want to keep Mayo around, which certainly it seems like Robert Kraft wants to, you could also give him the role of assistant or associate head coach or something, which would set up for a transition between the two down the road if Belichick plans to stay with the team. And this may also help to keep Mayo around a little bit longer, with many head coaching vacancies opening up likely this year. And, you know, Mayo's obviously, he's gotten interviews in the past. I would expect, especially the way the defense played this year, he will get more interviews. So you're going to have to elevate his role a little bit if you want to keep him around and you're not going to promote him to head coach. And if for some reason Bill does stay on as GM or wants to stay on, he could talk about employing, you know, more modern salary cap manipulations that other teams do to figure out how to spend more money without going over the cap and bring in a little bit more talent. Belichick was hired basically by Kraft 20 plus years ago because he was a salary cap savant. But now he's kind of behind the times there, and there's a lot of manipulation there that he could do that he hasn't really employed, that he could pitch to Robert Kraft and say, and he could include plans to prioritize the offense a little bit more heading into the draft and into free agency. Obviously, the quarterback position needs to be addressed, but we knew last season that they needed to address the receiver and tackle positions, which they really did not. Yes, they got Demario Douglas. That was a hit, but they drafted him in the 6th round. Nobody really expected that to work out, and they still didn't get that outside number 1 threat the Patriots really haven't had since Randy Moss. And they didn't address tackle. They brought in Riley Reif and Calvin Anderson and all these guys kind of last minute, and it was a massive failure. Michael Onwenu was moved to right tackle. It worked out really well, but that was kind of a decision that was made after the fact when you could have moved him there week 1 and the team probably would have looked a lot better. So those are some of the ideas I think Bill could potentially pitch to Robert Kraft to convince him to stay with the team. We'll see what happens. The Atlanta Falcons, they already fired their head coach last night. So expect more NFL teams to do so now that it is Black Monday. Could this also be Black Monday for Bill? We will see. After 2+ decades of success with the Patriots, I wouldn't think so. I think it would take a little bit longer, even if Kraft does intend on firing Bill, if he's already made up his mind. But either way, we'll be here at Pat's Cast to cover it, whether it happens this afternoon and this video is no longer relevant. We'll see what happens. Regardless, I would expect Robert Kraft to want the Patriots organization to issue a statement like he did last year, addressing the fans' concerns and coming up with some plans for the future. Last year, remember, he said, we're going to extend Gerard Mayo and give him a greater role, and we're going to look for an offensive coordinator. But remember, he issued that statement on Thursday after the season finale, so it still took 4 days for the comms team to come up with 3 or 4 sentences saying what the Patriots' plans are for the future. So we'll see if this is Black Monday for Bill. I would expect probably a decision about the future to be made this week, but I would be a little bit patient. It may not happen today, but regardless, we'll be here to cover it at Pat's Cast. Be sure to subscribe if you're on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and we'll be here all off season to cover the head coaching changes, if there are any, along with the GM. We'll talk a lot more about the draft as the Patriots have secured the number 3 pick. A lot of interesting decisions to be made there. Would you go with Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, or Marvin Harrison Jr.? Probably Caleb's out of the question unless they trade up to number 1. But hey, if you're number 3 and you're really impressed with Caleb Williams, you could maybe give up next year's first-round pick and trade up and bring him in. And that would be pretty exciting to bring in a guy like Caleb Williams. There's a lot we're going to be talking about, and certainly a lot of stories are going to break in the coming days, potentially coming hours. So stick to Pat's Cast. We'll be here along for the ride, and we'll be reporting out.